Hey guys, it's Sophia from the Hell Hades team, and I'm joined by Neva. And today we're going to be doing another deep dive into the new champion that's coming into the game, Ninja, specifically looking at his passive and how it affects the game, as it's a relatively new passive. So I'm just going to introduce Neva. As everyone knows, he is part of the Hell Hades team as a content. Joined me at the end of last video. How are you doing, Neva?
Yeah, not too bad. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. It's a bit
Good.
warm.
It is very warm.
Right then, so let's get started. First impressions when you saw the Ninja champion.
Face is a bit funny, isn't it?
Yeah,
But
a little bit.
other than that, I think it's cool. I mean, he's free. Can't really complain about a free champion, um, especially a legendary. But he's unique in terms of his passive. That's the first thing that kind of caught my
Yeah.
attention.
Which is where we
Um,
really started with this, right? We figured that we kind of wanted to know how big the passive would be to his kit. And I mean,
yeah.
that's the
So
purpose of this video, really, is for us to look at it from a math point of view and go, is the passive critical for him to be a successful champion?
yeah, but to begin with, we thought um, how it worked. Well, we were wrong about how it worked.
Right.
So we were quite underwhelmed by that. But obviously, we've made some discoveries.
Yeah, which we'll cover now. So just a quick overview of the kit for everyone watching. we we will see a full play test by the main man Hell Hades himself in another video. We're not going to cover that here. We're specifically focusing on the passive, but just so everyone knows, he's got an A1 single target hit with a 3.7 multiplier that applies decreased defense. He's got a random attack 3 times hitter on his A2, which is a 2 times multiplier and applies HP burn. If it's a target in a boss, it will also activate the HP burn. And then on his A3, he pivots. He's either got a single target attack with a 3.95 times multiplier, which also ignores 50% defense on bosses, or he's got an AoE attack against enemy heroes, which is a 3 times multiplier and it applies freeze. So that's pretty, I'm not going to go into too much detail there. The thing we want to look at here is the passive. Now, as Never mentioned, the first thing we were like, oh, it's only like base attack, so it's going to be 1509, which isn't crazy. But what we since discovered that is not the case. So the passive essentially is a ramp up based on a combination of skills. And I think this is important to note that you have to activate a full rotation of A1, A2, and A3 in order to get one stack. Against a normal hero, it'll be 10% per stack and 5% crit damage per stack. And against bosses, it will ramp up. Interestingly, it'll ramp the attack at twice as fast, and the crit damage will be 3 to 4. It'll be much faster. If you think you'll go up to 25%, you'll be at full stacks after 3 rotations on the bosses versus 5 rotations for attack. So effectively, if I'm attacking normal waves, it's 10 rotations for attack. And I think, was it 5, 10, 15, 20, 25? Quick maths without a coffee. 5, so it'll be 10. You'll need to do 10 rotations for the attack and 5 rotations for crit damage. And then for bosses, it'll be 5 and 3. So essentially twice as fast. So the base multiplier in the game when we first saw the code was a little bit confusing because until we actually saw the reveal, we didn't really understand what combo counter on heroes and combo counter on bosses mean. But now we know that means that you have to use an A1, an A2, and an A3. So what Never did is he looked at his champion pool and he realized he had Mountain King. Now, Mountain King does a similar effect. In the code, we see his multiplier for his passive is 0.5 times B underscore attack times enemies killed. Now, obviously, Mountain King's passive is increases his total attack based on killing 1 or 2 enemies, so 50 and 100%. So Never did some testing. And what did you find out, Never?
It is scaling from his max attack, not his base attack. So B underscore attack stood
So
for
if you've got 4,500 defense, when you go into combat, every hero then gets 450, but can't increase Braga's passive after you've entered the battle because it's at start. How we can use the same language to assume that Ninja's passive is doing exactly the same thing. Now, we're not going to show the math of proving that Mountain King does what it's meant to do, but effectively, B underscore attack means total stat entering the combat. Ninja can then increase that, and then increase attack works on the hero's current attack at the time of placing that buff. Therefore, if Ninja's at full stack, he gets 1.5 times the attack plus the passive contribution. If he's at no stacks, then he'll just get the normal. but it doesn't appear to be that increased attack is based on the start of combat. It is based on the time in which you place it.
Yep.
And then by inference, obviously, if B underscore attack means total attack when in combat, then B underscore crit damage is going to be the same thing. So you're going to get 25% of your total crit damage and 25% of your, and 100%, sorry, of your total attack, which is kind of insane. We're saying if you go into combat with 5,000 attack, you're going to end up with 10,000 attack if you fully stack as passive, which is insane.
Yeah, so I mean, stats that we'd love to hit on most champions.
Exactly. So what we want to do now is just go into a bit of math and look at what the impact of his passive does to his skills and his damage output. So in terms of where we think he's most strongest, it'll be Ultra Knight Mid-Clan Boss. Being able to get those stacks going really quickly is going to be difficult in any speed running dungeons. Potentially could have some usage in long Doom Tower boss fights if you can keep them alive. But effectively, you're going to be able to get it working in Clan Boss the easiest. So we checked the numbers together, and this is what we came out with. So this is kind of based on the 5,000 attack, 200% crit damage numbers here. The damage here doesn't include weaken or doesn't include any masteries or any additional ignore defense from sets. Now, just a caveat here. These numbers are calculated through an internal simulator that we were working on, where it effectively includes all the different combinations of different things. So going forward, when you see these numbers, they're not just arbitrary numbers that we've invented. It's not just multiplier times attack times something else. It is including all the different effects of sets, masteries, ignored effects from skills, books, you name it. This particular table only includes those raw numbers that I was talking about, where it's multiplier times books times a target. But the numbers you'll see when we look at the actual outcome of a clan boss will include masteries, will include stuff like weaken, will include any skill ignore defenses, set ignore defenses, and things like that. The important thing to note here is we're simulating his damage against an actual known defense quantity. It's very difficult, and I've seen this in some tier lists, to actually have damage listed in a tier or in a comparison without taking into consideration what you're attacking. It doesn't really create a real world scenario. So we've actually picked the Ultra Knight Clan boss. We know the defense of that clan boss is 1,520. Therefore, we can actually give a simulated end result of the damage. So the big thing that sticks out here is the passive has a significant impact on damage. We can see that, obviously. You know, we're saying at 5,000 attack, 200% crit damage, a critical hit is going to be 65,000, a non-crit 21,000, give or take. When the passives are there, you're doubling, obviously, the attack, but the crit damage is increasing it even further. So you're going to take your 65,000 crit and put it to 153,000 on an A1. You know, that's 133% increase. It's massive.
Yeah, it's absolutely huge. And then obviously with the A2, things are a little bit different because our numbers there show the HP burn ticks, because obviously he ignites the HP burn when he places it. Yeah. So the gain isn't as big there because the actual skill damage is generally lower.
Obviously the A2 is his big ticket item here. We're you know, when we're talking about boss fights, it's all about his A2. You'll see in the next tables how impactful and how much presence that A2 has because of the HP burn procs. So obviously you're only increasing your skill damage, not the HP burn. That can't be increased. And again, with the A3, it's a higher increase because you're ignoring defense. So therefore more damage, more ignore defense potential, essentially. And it's a slightly bigger multiplier. And there's more books involved as well. But the big thing to note here is a champion that does a 73,000 A3 on clan boss is not that strong. But a champion that does 201,000 on a clan boss is much stronger. Yeah. So without his passive, there's a question mark about whether or not he has enough damage to be viable in a lot of content. That's the caveat from here. So we'll move on now to, okay, well, we need his passive. How quickly can we ramp it up? So most people tend to run a double ME comp, or most people tend to run a Bateater if they're near end game, if they can get the speeds. Not everyone can. There's lots of unkillable comps. So we were just going to use the Bateater comp because that tends to be the go-to one once people have a double man-eater team.
Mm-hmm.
So if I wanted to ramp up the passive, it's not that slow to do in a clan boss. We're effectively staying. There's going to be you need 5 stacks to fully stack it up, and this would be the typical rotation you would do with Ninja. Now, one thing to note that everyone's like, oh, well, his A2 reduces cooldown. There is not actually a world where that actually is achievable because of the way that the rotation would always fall in. You're always going to go A2, A3, A2 first. That's great. You get your cooldown. But then you're not going to have A3 back on stack 1. You're not going to have A2 back in stack 1 to do it again. You're going to be doing A3 after that A1, which means you're already going to be doing A2 on the next turn regardless. So from a math point of view, you don't gain the benefit of the decreased cooldown on the effect of the A3. So this is the rotation. But this results in you needing to do 8 clan boss turns to actually activate the passive fully, which is really quick.
Yeah, you're going to get it for most of the fight, especially obviously considering a 2-to-1 ratio, you're going to be getting a lot of uptime on that.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think it's for clan boss, his passive is amazing. It is really strong. I think when we consider how it would work in sort of a dragon fight, are you really going to be getting this many turns before the dragon is dead? It's quite unlikely. Doom Tower bosses potentially, but then you might have to sacrifice damage anyway to be able to keep him alive. So there's question marks about whether he's viable in other places, and I'm sure Hell Hades will go through that in more detail than we are, but from a purely passive point of view, it's really strong for clan boss. That's the summary here, and it's really quick to ramp it up. So we're going to look at some numbers now about what we predict his damage potential could be in a clan boss team. So we just want to set some caveats here. We have used standard clan boss masteries, and what we mean by that, War Master, because he's doesn't do enough attacks to benefit from the Giant Slayer. He needs War Master. We're talking Grim Resolve or Heart of Glory, whichever you alternate, and down the offense tree with Bring It Down, Methodical, and then obviously defensive masteries. So you get the counterattacks. Now this doesn't consider the counterattack masteries because of the variability of it. So that would be additional damage on top of these numbers.
Yeah.
We've also considered that increased attack and decreased defense has 100% uptime, because we're looking at it from a Bateater point of view. Getting weaken in this comp is going to be quite difficult because typically your DPS would be both a decreased defense and weaken. He only does decreased defense. So we haven't included weaken, but we have got a chart to show how much weaken would make a difference. We're assuming that Ninja's got 100% crit rate and that he's fully booked. And we're looking at the 0% range. So if people don't know, when you do damage, you'll do your calculated damage, which is 0%, and then it will choose a number on a 1% interval from either 10% greater variability. We are considering his ignore defense on his A3, but we haven't got any cruel sets and we haven't got any other artifact sets on here. He's just assuming a standard comp and a standard build, no particular effect in, like no relentless, no fury or anything like that, no toxic. Right. So what is the build? We've gone for 4,500 attack and 200% crit damage. Now, speaking from personal experience, I know I can push that number to probably 5,000 attack, 250% crit damage. But we wanted to make sure that it was relatively relatable to most people. And I think you would agree, Never, that 4,500 attack, 200% crit damage is a good number.
Yeah, it's more than achievable for a lot of people, that's for sure.
Yeah, brilliant. So how do we look at these numbers? So the first one here we've got, if we never had his passive, how much damage will he do? So we can see, because of the way his skills would rotate on a 2-1 rotation in the setup, he'd have 97 attacks. And in terms of the skill rotation, it would be pretty evenly distributed between the skills. Now we can see straight away, the A2 has an insane amount of damage contribution. Like it is counting for 71% of his total damage without his stacks. So it'd be the same thing as running a poisoner with no attack and decreased defense and increased defense up, those kind of concepts. Now, when we apply his actual passive here, we can see that there's a significant jump as we expected. His A3 increases, his A3 increases by 3 million. he gets an extra 5 million on his A2. And again, it doesn't affect the HP burn, but the fact he's hitting 3 times means he does get a lot more damage. And his A1 is hitting for, was that 2.4, 2.2 more million? Yeah. Without the passive, he's not viable for the role. I think someone like Fane does it much better. And there's question marks whether he actually beats a Fane anyway.
Yeah.
So we've included War Master averages here. So just for context, this would be, we've got 97 attacks, times it by 60%, we have about 58.3 attacks, and then multiply that by a non-weakened clan boss, which I think is 53575, give or take a few numbers off the top of my head. And we've added that onto the total. So from a DPS role in Bateater, 29.9 million.
It's pretty good solid amount. Yeah.
That's solid. There's some caveats people need to be aware of, though. If you're going to run Ninja, you're going to have to remember that Weaken is not in your comp, which means that you're not just reducing your own damage, you're reducing the team's damage, you're reducing your War Master proc values. Everything is going to be 25% or less. Now, we're on the fence here as to whether or not that loss of Weaken justifies using him over someone like Fane. Because Fane does similar things in the sense that it's got a poison that it keeps up partially. It's got a decreased defense and weaken, and she hits relatively hard. I think he probably matches Fane, but I would be concerned, like he 100% will not beat a Dracomorph without weaken.
No.
That's not going to happen. It's just too much damage there. If you can include weaken, then it's a different conversation. But I think from the conclusion we drew from this is he a viable clan boss champion? 100%. Can he perform with other damage dealers? Most likely.
Yep.
Considering this is relatively open builds in the sense that it's not min-maxed, you haven't extremely put it high. You know, if we were to compare this with Fane's skill damage would be lower than this, I think. But you can also run Giant Slayer on Fane, which you can't run on. There's different caveats. But he's strong and he's fun. So I think if, you know, especially for newer accounts, mid-game accounts, you know, the potential is really high. We've only looked at Unkillable Bateater, but there's no reason, due to his passive, that you can't run a 2,000 attack ninja with a 4,000 defense ninja and then get 4,000 attack from his passive.
Yeah.
There's benefits that's what the passive enables you to be able to achieve, is where if you're not able to run a very delicate tune or anything of that nature, you can just literally run a standard high defense comp and just watch him pick up his attack through his own passive.
Yeah, he's still going to be able to get a lot of damage out of this kit.
So we did want to include Weaken just to show you the difference here of how much damage is being lost. So obviously on the left, we've got without Weaken, and the blue is obviously no passive, and the red is the stacked passive, so we can see the numbers being reproduced. Weaken obviously doesn't really do much without the passive, but you can see that the inflation you get from that Weaken multiplication on his when he's stacked passive is quite high. Like 35 million is Draco numbers for most people. 35, 40 million, that's the range for Draco numbers.
See, so that's not considering the chances of Relentless procs or anything either. So if you were to run him in Relentless, like most people would with Draco, then these numbers could be significantly higher.
Yeah. Now, obviously, if you've got a Fury set, it's really strong for Unkillable. So that 35.5 million is what you can expect if you had a Fury set instead of Weaken. And then obviously, if you added another 25% on that, that's what happened to Weaken. If you did Relentless, there would be another 18 turns on average that you would have per clan boss, which means more HP burns, which means more damage. We've actually gone for quite a low accessible build, but there's a lot of opportunity to push that number up to the 39. And I don't know about you, Never, but I wouldn't be surprised to see 40 million ninjas and clan boss screenshots coming out.
No, not at all.
It's possible.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, the gear that we've based this on is pretty achievable by a large part of the game.
Yeah.
A large part of the player base. So we know for a fact that people could make significantly stronger builds than this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. I'm sure we'll have a go ourselves and see what we can produce.
100%.
So the last question we want to ask is, obviously the nature of the passive is a multiplicative effect. So as many people who probably watch this video will know and listen to our podcast and also interact in Discord. There's a damage efficiency tool that we have on the website, which basically gives you an equation for balancing your attack or primary stat with crit damage. So the question that was raised to me and to Never was, does this change with Ninja's passive? You know, because it's a different variance, like 100% attack, 25% crit damage. Do I need more crit damage or do I need more attack? So we tried to put some numbers in the table, and I think this is quite difficult to actually represent. There's a lot of numbers here, but just to give people an idea of what kind of numbers you can see, this is based purely on A2, and it includes weaken, books, and increase attack. So basically, the raw skill damage, how much does it affect if you have different ranges? And I think what we've basically concluded, you know, if we look at some examples here, so if I've got a build right now that's got 5,000 attack and 200% crit damage, do I add another 1,000 attack or do I have 50% crit damage? The numbers are about the same. You know, we're talking like 6K more if you add more attack than 50% crit damage. So I don't think you need to build him any differently. I think you just build him like you would normally build any damage champion, making sure you're on that equal damage efficiency rating. And, you know, you just increment. If you get to like 5,500 attack, then I start thinking more crit damage is probably better because the numbers are so high that crit damage is going to make it even higher. But yeah, I don't know about you, Never, but I'll probably just build him standard.
Yeah.
I think that's the best way forward.
Yeah, it's a safe option. The difference is very minimal until obviously very high amounts of attack. So it's probably just easier just to build them as you would.
Brilliant. Okay, well, I think we'll finish off there. That was just a bit of a deep dive mathematically into the Ninja passive, how it works. And I think now it's left to you guys to test them out and have a bit of fun with them. So we'll leave it there and
yeah, obviously, as well as that, if there is anything that you guys want to see covered, obviously we are open to suggestions for future videos. So leave a comment if there's something that you've got that you'd like to see covered.
We're gonna have to do that closing bit again because the cat woke up.
That's okay. It was quite quiet.
Right, we'll just do the closing bit again.
Yeah, you start.
So that was a bit of a deep dive into Ninja's passive. We just wanted to support like the start again.
It was so perfect.
So that was just a mathematical dive into Ninja's passive. Hell Hades will have a full playtest, I'm sure, video going through it in detail. But this can support that video so you can understand in detail how the passive works, how I should build him, how I approach it. Am I actually gaining any benefit from the passive in different areas? And yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. And keep an eye out for our next science video. We're not sure what the next topic is going to be, but depends if we get enough legendary books to test our clan boss teams.
Yeah, and obviously if you guys have any ideas for things you'd like to see covered, please just leave a comment and we'll see what we can do.